Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, and welcome to my guide for Aphrodite. Aphrodite is a support type mage in SMITE, but despite her supportive attributes, she's seen in the mid lane as much as she's seen in the support role. Build wise, Aphro tries to fit in as many meta mage items as possible, but must go into at least a bit of defense in most situations. In the mid lane, try your best to find a good balance between power, penetration, and a bit of defense. It's not always easy. Funny enough, in the support role, it's the other way around. Go basic defensive build, but try to squeeze in some damage too. Relics wise, well, you can get a little fun here thanks to her ultimate, but typically it's just beads and ages for the mid lane. Meditation, Shell, and even Sunder are actually pretty good on her as replacements for ages, but when you're first starting out, of course, stick to the basic stuff and just go beads and ages. And naturally in the support role, you want to go your typical Meditation or Shell depending on what suits the situation best. Then go an offensive relic second, again like a Sunder or a Frenzy. So let's get to Aphro's passive, one of the most simple in the game. For every enemy or ally near Aphrodite, she gains protections, up to 9 times of course, accounting for every god in the game other than Aphro herself. But this is a passive that, as you'll see, is quite necessary for her, but is mostly out of Aphro's hands. There are extremely niche moments where you want to walk over to a teammate or maybe even an enemy as you get damaged for some extra protections, but for the most part you'd be close to allies already thanks to her first ability. Aphrodite blows a kiss. This kiss will travel through minions but will stop on walls and gods. If it hits an enemy, the enemy is stunned. I mean, who wouldn't be? But if it hits an ally, Aphro becomes linked to them and they both benefit from bonus movement speed and mana regen, and the ability is reduced to a mere 2-second cooldown, enhancing the next benefit. If Aphro kisses an enemy while linked to an ally, they will retain the link, but the ally Aphro is linked to will deal bonus % damage to the stunned enemy for a whole 5 seconds. If you can't tell already, this is the core of Aphrodite's supportive play, and there are interactions with the rest of her abilities that we have yet to get to. But first, the ability itself. You naturally want to be linked to someone at all times if you can. As a mid laner, you can link to your jungler, and as a support, you've got your ADC in the early game, then the jungler or mid laner once you leave lane. There are naturally times as a mid laner where you're going to just have to drop the link from your jungler because they're going out to gank or to farm, but don't forget keeping linked speeds you both up, so you can grab neutral objectives like the mid camps quicker than other mid jungle duos, and you can even accompany them on ganks and make the rotation itself faster thanks to that extra movement speed. It's very versatile, but don't worry, it's not complicated. Well, it can be if an enemy and an ally are stacked on top of each other. In this situation, the kiss will always go for your ally if they're not linked to you. So say you're linked to your ADC, but then your support dives onto an enemy and you want to follow up with a kiss to stun. The kiss will unfortunately go to your support since they got all up in the enemy's face to CC them. Little interactions are something to keep in mind, but again, super simple ability. Never forget as well that you can easily stun enemies who are trying to dive you with this ability, and it's one of the best self-peel options in a one-on-one for this reason. But let's get to self-peel, the ability, with Aphro's second ability. Aphro blasts an AoE around her, damaging and knocking back all enemies, and it applies a slow. If Aphro is linked, the ally will also perform the ability, but will only apply the slow and luckily will not stack the damage with Aphro's version of this ability. And let's touch on that for a moment. It may not do a lot of damage in the early game, but once you start approaching the late game, this ability can easily half-hit squishy targets. It's great as well for finishing off waves and kills. And don't forget about the slow on this ability. Even though you push enemies away, it can easily still lead to a kill thanks to the damage plus the bonus slow. Of course though, this is intended to be a self-peel ability. I mean, it's literally called back off. It's not bad at this, but you do have to be careful about when you use it. If you get jumped on and immediately use your 2, you will absolutely just get CC'd and completely waste the ability. So it takes decent matchup knowledge to know when the ability is most useful. Against the Susano for instance, say he pulls you in and 3s you. If you 2 as soon as he pulls you, he's just going to teleport to you after the 2 is done and combo you like nothing happened. So you have to toe the fine line between trying to interrupt combos on some gods, and on others try to make them never happen in the first place. Back to using it aggressively, well, the only other thing is using it on a teammate, and that's very simple. Of course, it's understandable to want to save the ability for self-peel, but realistically, if there's anyone, especially a non-tank near your linked ally, just use the ability. Trust me, you want that extra damage. This leads to neat combos with Aphro and other gods too, one of course being with Mr. Susano himself. Remember that pull ability? Well, now that he's linked to Aphro, he now does an insane burst with the slow on top of that pull. Coordination like that isn't strictly necessary, but again, a swift brush up on what your teammates can do can lead to some crazy combos. Now for something not so crazy, Aphro's third ability. Aphro fires in a rectangle AoE in front of her, and after a short windup represented by the dove's progression down this AoE, she will apply a damage over time to any enemies currently in the AoE, and will begin healing herself over time. And you guessed it, any allies who are linked to Aphro will also be healed. It's pretty boring. It does what it's described to do, and that's that. Just 3 main things to know about. that initial windup is very noticeable, far more than on most abilities, so on anything moving, i.e. gods, you're going to have to lead the ability a bit, which can be a bit tricky, especially at weird angles and directly parallel to your intended target, but you'll get the hang of it, I believe in you. This is also Aphro's largest source of damage by a landslide, given that it's a damage over time effect and therefore has very high damage and power scaling to make up for the fact that your opponent could more easily get healed or lifesteal their way through the ability. So it's a very easy wave clear ability, but if you're ever being chased down, you need to pop it to heal yourself, losing your main damage source. While that's a shame, try to be tactical in situations like this. Don't hold on to the ability for too long. You want to be healing as often as possible as Aphro, but it's not out of the question to try and bait your aggressors into this line of fire, or to 180, kiss, then throw this ability onto them. Oh, of course, and kissing. It's a super easy setup tool to easily confirm this ability onto enemies. While it can go through minions though, anyone playing against you is going to see this combo coming, so don't stick your neck out too far to plant a kiss for your third ability. They might just be trying to bait you in to use both of your best single target CC ability and your best damaging ability. The final mechanic, and no offense to Aphro players, the only really mechanically intensive thing about the character, kissing on the fly in reaction to a teammate initiating or taking too much damage to instantly heal them. Since Aphro typically has one target she wants to stay linked to, usually a jungler or ADC, but sometimes a soloner too, to be useful in fights there's going to be moments where you have to switch your link from one teammate to another, to another, to another to keep them healed up with your 3, peeled with your 2, and survive just about anything with your ultimate. Aphro becomes CC and damage immune, and she can cast this ability even if she's already afflicted by CC, just like Purification Beads. And you guessed it, whoever is linked to Aphro when she uses this ability will also be CC and damage immune as well. It's an ability that should be popped pretty much every fight, except for of course scenarios where your team just steamrolls right over the opposition. The difficulty around this ability really just depends on who you're fighting. Sometimes you need to be decisive against combo characters like Susana or Lancelot, where if you ult as soon as they start comboing, they're just going to wait out the immunity and still kill you. So it takes decent knowledge of the enemy god to know what part of the combo to avoid. But then against one and done gods like Thor or a heavy hitter like Kukulkan, Vulcan, or especially Poseidon, you really only have one very obvious ability to worry about, and it's a cakewalk. Frankly, with this ability, you do have to be selfish for a lot of the match, but whether the ultimate is for you or for your link partner, never be too trigger happy with it. Using Aphro's ultimate on something minute, or god forbid nothing at all, is pretty much the equivalent of turning off your monitor and going to bed, because it's really the only thing keeping the entire team from just jumping on you and killing you. So the difficulty in this ability comes from your situational awareness and of course, your positioning, so that the ability won't just get popped for free because you were in the wrong spot. Typically, even in the support role, Aphrodite stays way back in the fight because of this, and tries not to group up too close to her linked ally, instead staying in the ability range of her tanks. She's a supportive god, but she herself is going to need some support in the form of peel from her teammates to make it through fights, so don't tunnel vision on trying to save teammates or focus too hard on what your linked ally is doing. As again, that kiss is the ability to set up kills for your teammates or swap your link over to someone for an instant ultimate, so don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Well, okay, sometimes you can. Get a fed ADC on your team, a late game beast like Kali or Mercury, or even a very fed bruiser warrior, and you can just link up with them, press some buttons occasionally and win. But you should never count on that being the case. For combos with Aphro, it's pretty simple. Pretty much just 1, basic, 3, and when you're very far ahead, or with teammates, 1, basic 3, basic 2, and then chase. For ability leveling, you want your 3 at level 1, your 2 at level 2, and your 3 at level 3. Since your 2 isn't really going to be doing anything for you just yet, and it's not like you can just walk up to the wave in the current start and live to tell the tale. From there you want to max your 3, your 2, then your 1, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. And on the mid lane Aphro, you can put 1 level into your ultimate level 5, but then skip leveling it until your 3 and 2 are maxed. So that's Aphro. She's a pretty basic pocket healer type of character, but this being SMITE, there's plenty of fun and interesting things for you to do on the character to spice it up a bit. She has struggled for some time though due to an aging kit, especially the concept around her too. It worked 10 years ago, but we have things like Morgan Le Fay too now, so it's a bit outclassed. And frankly, there's nothing Aphro does that Hel and Chang'e can't do. On paper, Aphro can heal more, and gives more immunity, but she's giving it to one target, and that can definitely win you some ranked games with your jungler you're duoed with, but when it comes to fighting more coordinated or simply better enemy teams, Aphro feels way less impactful than her other healer counterparts. So she's a god you want to pick up because you like her, not because you want the best healer mage in the game in your arsenal. That's all I have on Aphro for now. Sorry for no gameplay in this one, Aphro's clearly a good candidate for it. But she's not great at the moment in mid, and that's where I've always liked her, and if I go support, I'll be stuck as Aphro support with a random ADC. And if that's not enough to make a grown man cry, I don't know what is. Still, hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.